Yeah. Okay, so right, then I'll just start on with the workshop. Right. Okay. So welcome everybody to Intro to Python workshop. Right? And today, together with me, I have Celine. Right? My name is Rayan, and we'll be teaching you guys the basics of Python today. Right? So before we start, let's introduce a little more about us. Right? We are both students at Anglo-Chinese Junior College, and we are both studying in year 2, which is J2 in JC, right? And we both take computing in as an A-level subject, and we're both really passionate about coding. Right? So this is the brief timeline of what we're going to be doing today, right? So the first 2 sections, I'll be explaining, right, introducing what is Python and why you want to use Python in, as a coding language. Next, I'll be talking about, the basic and important syntax and data types in Python, which you will be using your day-to-day, coding, right? Then Celine will be talking about the data structures, tuples, lists in Python, and then we'll go through some loops and make your own functions, as well as learn a really tough concept of recursion, right? But don't worry, we can take it step by step, and you guys will be able to learn it from Celine later. And then throughout this whole workshop, you guys will be able to practice your skills, the skills that we teach you in questions, right? So let's start. Why Python, right? No, it's not the snake that you guys are familiar with, right? Python is a programming language. And you might be thinking, right, there's so many coding languages out there, but why would you want to use Python, right? Well, Python is used in almost everywhere, right? It can be used as you can build websites, you can build apps, you can do automation, data analysis, and if you're interested, you can even use it for hacking. Capture the flags, use Python most of the times, and it's used in a lot of areas today. And because it is so straightforward and simple, right? It has surpassed Java, C++ to be the most in-demand coding language in this year, right? Anyone can pick up Python today, and it's really easy because unlike Java and C++, it's like English, right? The Python syntax is really similar to English. Okay, so right, let's move on to teaching some of the basic syntax and data types. But first, I want to introduce a scenario to you. You're in the middle of a math exam, right? But you forgot to bring your calculator, right? And you're not allowed to talk to your classmates. You can't ask for a calculator because the exam rules. But luckily, you have a computer beside you and you can only access Python. Well, you are lucky that the questions are just related to adding of numbers. But you might be thinking, how do you add in Python, right? How do you take in numbers and how do you produce the answer? I'll go through this in a short while. But first, let's talk about the basic data types. There are 4 main data types in Python, right? We have integers, we have strings, booleans, and float. And if we take a look at the side, we have some examples of what these data types are. Right. We take a look at integers. Easier way to remember what integers are whole numbers, right? You don't have any decimal points at the back. So you see 10, 32, and 42 are examples of integers. Next up, we have strings, right? You might be thinking, what are strings? Well, in Python, it's just a more fancy way of saying text or characters, right? So it is a sequence of characters, and you make sure you surround them with quotation marks, right? So by putting quotation marks at the side, you are declaring it as a string, right? So strings, short form, basically they are sentences or characters in Python. You'll be encountering them in many programming languages, and you'll even be using them later. All right. So now let's look at Boolean. Right, Boolean is fairly simple. Just remember, as long as it is true or false, it is a Boolean. Right? So Booleans are either true or false. Right? That's all. Now we look at floats. We remember what integers are, right? Integers are whole numbers. So floats are the opposite, right? Floats are numbers with decimal points, right? You see 8.2, 23.4 are examples of what floats are, right? So very straightforward, right? It may seem a bit complicated at the start, but with these examples, I'm sure you guys are able to visualize what each of these data types are, right? So we have all these data, right? But how do we store all of them in our program? A very simple way is variables. In many programming languages, we use variables as a way to store all this information that you input or have in the program, right? So you can have, any name for your variable. You can have X, you can have Y, you have language, as long as it is not the name of a function of, a built-in function, it is fine. Right? I'll go through what functions means later. Right? But first, so try and understand that, variables are a way of storing these data types. And what's even interesting about these variables is that you can actually define these data types. Right? So this will be, Celine will be going through all of this, defining of data structures later on. But this is the basic of what variables are in Python, right? So to declare what variables are, you just simply put an equal sign, right? The name of the variable and equals to whatever you want to store, right? Very straightforward. Now we dive into some basic operators that you will definitely be using today. We have addition, subtraction. These are the basic operators that you use in your math, right? Now, instead of using a times and a divide sign, we have an asterisk and a slash. Asterisk meaning multiply, slash meaning divide. Now, these four should be fairly straightforward, but the next three is the more confusing ones, right? You are not really familiar with these three operators, right? So double slash, what does it mean? Right? It basically helps you find the quotient, right, of something divided by something, right? And conversely, you have the modular sign, which is the percentage sign, which is to find the remainder, right? Don't worry, let's try this out, right? You can open up your Repl.it and then let's try this out. Let's say we divide, usually we want to divide 10 with 3, right? 10 divided by 3. What do you think this will give you? Right? It will give you, 3.3333, and it goes on forever. But this is not going to help you, will it? Right? You want to find, so if you want to find the quotient to, you want to find this 3, you just want to know what is the quotient. Instead of, normal, just divide sign, just add another slash. And you'll find the quotient of it, which is 3. Right? You ignore all the decimal points and it just outputs, the whole number that that you get when you divide it. Now, what if you want to find the remainder though? Then we just use the modular sign, right? The percentage sign gives you the remainder. Okay? So what do you think it will give you? Right? Think about it. 10 divided by 3, what's the remainder? Right? Type it in chat. And if you do math, it should be fairly simple, right? So 10 modulus 3 should return to you 1, right? The remainder of 10 divided by 3 is 1, right? And it should return 1, right? So now let's look at the exponential, right? This is another way of saying power, right? So let's say you want to find 2 to the power of 2. You just put 2, double asterisk, and 2, right? So try this out on your own in your Repl.it, right? Let's try you want to find 2 to the power 3. So what do you type? Right? Try this out on your Repl.it. A way to see what your input, what you can, what the answer is, just put in a print bracket like how I write it here, and then you write the 2 power 3, something like that, right? So let's try it. 2 to the power of 3, right? You print what is it? What's the answer, right? And the answer is 8, right? So 2 to the power 3 is 8, right? So yeah, this is the basic idea of what the double asterisk is. Now, let's look at some logical operators. Logical operators is very similar to English, right? And or, right? So we take a look here. If expression 1 and expression 2 are true, it returns to you a true. If expression 1 or expression 2 is true, it returns to you a true, right? But what if one of the expression in the end is false? Then it won't return a true, right? You need both of them to be true for you to get true. But if you look at OR, even if one of them is false, right, you still get a true, right? As long as you have a true inside, you get a true, right? Let's try this out, okay? Let's have a short example. So print the true and true. It should return true because both of them are true, right? Now, what if it's false? True and false. Right? Now it will return to you false. Now let's look at OR. Right? Remember, OR only requires one of them to be true to return a true, right? To give you a true output. So we try run it, and then now we get a true, right? So that's basically what AND and OR is about, right? Not a very simple way of understanding what not is to just flip the true and false. So let's say we declare X to be true. By putting a not in front, we flip it. Right? Instead of a true, we flip it to a false. Right? So yeah, very useful and very powerful operators in coding. Now let's look at some comparison operators. Right? The first two should be pretty straightforward. Right? The left arrow represents less than. The right arrow represents greater than. Now, the more unfamiliar ones are the last four, right? Well, let's look at the third one first, right? Equal to. Remember how we said that declaring a variable is putting an equal sign at the start, like just one equal sign, right? So now, when we want to check if two element x and element y are the same, we just put two equal sign, right? So let's try this out, right? So print is, we ask ourselves, is 1 equals to 1, right? It is true, right? So it is equals to 1. Right? So now we look at the next operator, right? Not equal to. If you can see here, there's a exclamation mark sign, right? So in almost all the languages, right, exclamation mark sign represents not, right? When you want to find if something is not equals to something, you use similar to how you use equal to. Instead, you just replace the first equal sign with an exclamation mark. Okay. Now less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, right? An easier way to visualize this out when you're coding is to try and change it to English words, right? When you want to find if 10 is less than or equals to 12, we try and remember what is the sign for less than or equals to, right? So we can recall less than or equals to is left arrow, equals sign, and then whatever number you have at the right. Right, let's try and run this. Right, true. Right. So what if we want to find if is 10 greater or equals to 12? Let's try this. 10 greater than or equals to 12. It is false. Why is it false? Right? Because if we think about it, 10 is less than 12, right? It's not more than 12, it's not equals to 12. That's why you have a false returned to you. Okay? Right. So, right, not equals to. Similarly, we ask Python, is it true that 10 is not equals to 12? Right? We try and wrap around the logic, right? So we are asking if 10, is it true that 10 is not equals to 12? Right? Let's try and run this. And it's true, right? 10 is not equals to 12, right? So what if we put 12 not equals to 12? Right? We should return a false, right? Why? Because 12 is equals to 12, right? They're the same number. Okay, so what I've shown above are basically what you call Boolean expressions in Python, right? Boolean expressions is like asking computer a question, and the computer will return to you, is it true or is it false, right? An example can be, is 1 greater than 2? Is the string high equals to the high, right? It equals to high. And because they are similar, it's true, right? So these are some examples of Boolean expressions in Python. And you will be using them in the next few sections of the program, right? So try and remember all these, comparison operators. And if you find it tough, to convert it into code, right, try and think about it in English, and you can just add the signs together. Right? So whenever you have difficulty in coding out something, right, try and think about it in English, and because of Python's straightforward syntax, you should be able to code it out. Right? Let's take like about 1 minute and see if you understand what this code does. Right? Take about 1 minute, think about it. Right? And feel free to type it in chat. Right? What do you think this piece of code does? Right? Try and convert this to English, and try and make sense of what the code means. Right? Right? Okay. So about 1 minute has passed, and okay, you have given some thought on what this code means, and yeah. So those people who guessed that the code asks for your name, and then prints out hello and then your name, you are absolutely correct, right? So let's try and run this code. Let's try and run this code, right? So let's try and run. free to code this out as well, right? Try this code yourself. Go to your Repl.it. Anyone with any problems, just feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. Right? Don't worry. And right. So now that you have somewhat copied the code, right? Let's try and run the code. Right? Let's try and run the code. So Python asks, what is your name? Right? What is your name? We say, all right, my name is Ryan. Right? My name is Ryan. And then, hello, Ryan. The code talks to you, right? The code says hello, and then it greets me, right? Hello, Ryan, whatever I output, right? So we take a closer look at what all these code mean, right? Because you guys may not be familiar with the syntax. So we take a look, line by line. First line, right? Name equals to input, right? Then bracket, right? Right. So name equals to, right? Remember the first section we talked about variables. What this does is basically putting the input into a variable name, right? So the function we are using here is input. This is a way to talk to the computer, right? Talk to the program. Right? You input anything into the program. And all right, so what does function mean? Right? What is function? You hear me talking about functions, but you don't know what it is. Right? So functions are like basically built-in methods in programming languages surrounded with these brackets, right? So you'll learn to make your own function later, and you can understand more about functions in a later section. Okay. So, right. So first line of code, right? The computer asks what's your name, and it stores it into the name variable, right? Now you might see this string inside, right? What is your name? And then you see a string, the quotation marks. Okay. So these quotation, you can put a string inside the quotation marks, the brackets, as a way for your computer to talk to you, right? You can try and change this up, right? What name would you like to enter? And then it serves as a way for the computer to talk to you, right? It prints out the information, and it talks to you. And you see this, you see that it's not doing anything, right? You see that it's still running, right? So now you have to put in an input, right? You can type into the console, and that's your form of input, right? So Ryan. Okay, so feel free to change the message inside of these two brackets, or you can choose not to put it in anything at all, right? And then you just have no messages will be printed out, but you still can type input. Okay, so yeah, it's optional if you want to put something inside, but it's a way of for the computer to talk to you. Okay? So putting a string is a way to talk to the user. Okay. So characteristics of the function input. Okay. Any inputs that you put into you put inside of the program, Python will think, okay, I received an input, right? And this, for easier sake, right? This is classified as a string data type. Remember, we talked about strings. So strings are a sequence of characters, right? So Python will naturally think of it as a string, right? But this won't be helpful, right? Because you think about it, we are trying to make a program that takes in integers and output the sum of it. So what are we going to do with strings? We can't add text together, right? You can't add the text 1 and 2 and return a 3. So how do you get integers from an input? Right? We use the function int bracket bracket, right? So, what does this int do? This int function, right? It looks new, right? You haven't come across this at all. What this int function does is that it converts a string into an integer, right? You want to add two numbers together, right? But then you need it to be an integer, right? Only integers or floats can be added together. So to achieve your goal, you want to put an int in front to convert it into a number, right? So let's try this out, shall we? Right. So you have the variable x, right? Input number, right? The program is asking me for a number, right? And we try this out. Okay, we print out what will happen. Let's see what happens, right? If you add a string with a digit, right? You can add 1 to the string, the input. Right? What you'll notice is that you will receive an error. Why? Right? Because when you input over here, right? When you input, it is a string, right? It's a text. Okay? You cannot add a text with a number, right? So how do we, work around this? How do we, achieve our goal of adding 1 to whatever input we put? Remember the function int, and take note, the number of brackets you have on the left, make sure you have the same number of brackets on the right, right? Make sure you close this out, right? You see 2 brackets on the right, 2 brackets on the left, okay? Right. So what do you think will be printed out from here? Let's give it a guess, right? Do you think it will run now? Will you run? You type it in chat if you think it will run now, right? Will you still have this error? Now we change it into integer. Okay. So give it some thought, right? And then now let's try this out, okay? So, right, Python asked me what's the number on input. Let's go with 10, right? And now we can finally, right, add the number together, right? Add 1 to x, right? So this is a very powerful function in Python, right? And remember, every time you want to get integer input, you just make sure you wrap it around with an int function, right? Okay, so let's talk about outputs. Right? Remember, all along I've been using the function print. So very intuitive, right? Print is basically an output, correct? So remember the code snippet that we tried to figure out just now, right? Print hello, and then you have a plus name. Okay? So we all know what print does. But what is inside of this bracket, right? You're confused, like, hey, why can I have a string here and then be plus and then we have a variable there, right? Okay, let's try this out, right? Print. Right. So we try this out, okay? Python asks you what's your name, type in Ryan. It prints out your name, right? This is name, right? This is a variable, right? But remember, this is a string. And a very cool thing about Python is, very convenient thing about Python is that you can add the strings together, right? What do you mean by adding of the strings together? We try this example. Okay, we don't ask for input now. We just try normal printing, right? Hello, right? We plus, okay, adding, add another string, right? My name is Ryan. And we try and run this. Hello, my name is Ryan. Right. So this concept is called string concatenation. Right. It's basically you join the two strings together. Okay. So remember the name variable. The name variable is a string, right? So we take in an input is a string, and similar to the example just now, we can add the strings together. We can join them together, and you output hello. My name is hello Ryan, right? So we enter a string, right? Try this out, right? The best way to learn coding is to practice and try this out on your Repl.it account. Okay, right? So you take in an input which is a string. Now you print. You join the strings together and you print it out. Right? So now it says hello Ryan. Right? So this is the basic understanding of what string concatenation is. Right? You can do a lot of it. You can do a lot of things with it. Right? It helps with user interface, which you guys will be using throughout your Python journey, right? But yeah, so now you understand some basics of string concatenation, right? Those people with questions, feel free to ask it in chat, and Celine will assist you. Okay. Right. Take some time to digest all of this, right? So feel free to try this out on your own. Right, you have your Repl.it, you have your free coding software. Right, let's try things out. Don't be afraid to try. Right. Right. So I'll just talk about some more examples. Right. So we saw earlier you can print variable names. Right. Print. I set my name to Celine. I print the name. And then you get Celine. And remember, I have been using mathematical operations inside the two brackets, right? Yeah, you can. So you can do it. You can do expressions inside these two brackets. Right? 3 plus 2, what is 10 divided by 2, something like that, right? So feel free to try things out. Play around with how you can use print and taking in of inputs, right? If you guys want, you can copy this code and try this on your own. Try changing it up. Change what the Python says, talks to you, what he says, and then you can add other stuff here as well. Or if you don't, or if you want to add more things, you can also add a plus. Right? I'll come back. Right? Join these strings. Have fun. Right? Coding is fun. Right? Try and play around with it. Right? So try this out on your own. Right? Try and understand. Try and digest what this code does. Right? Right. Okay. Now that you guys have experimented a little on these basic functions, we go back to the main purpose of why we are learning all this, right? Python is magical. You can do so much with it, right? So now that you know how you can take in two integers and output the sum, do math operations on it, we try and create a code, right, that takes in the two integers and output the sum of it. This is for your math test, okay? So remember, okay, this is for your math test, right? You only have Python beside you, and you cannot access a calculator, right? So we try this out, right? Try this task out. I'll give you guys about 3 minutes. Right? 3 minutes, you guys try and code this out. Very simple code, right? Take in two integers and output the sum of it, okay? So those with any questions, please feel free to type it in chat, and then we'll be going through each of you guys' Repl.it account, those that you guys have shared to us, and we'll look at your code, right? If you guys have any questions, just unmute yourself and ask, right? You have the next 3 minutes to yourself to try this question out, right? So, remember, okay, you want the code that takes in. So, how do you take in something, right? You use the function input of the function input, right? So, remember, okay, you want to take in two integers. It can be any integers, right? Try to make a code that incorporates print and input, right? Not just print, okay? Right. So try this out. Don't be afraid. Experiment, right? And make sure when you guys type input, right, it's all lowercase, okay? So the function is all lowercase, right? Not capital letter, right? Make sure you store the input into a variable also, so you can store all the data inside, right? And when you surround a string inside, right, make sure it's quoted, right? It's quoted, right? So make sure you quote and then you type something inside, okay? So I'm seeing someone's code right now. Right. So he has input bracket, but he had an error, right? Number is not defined, right? Because when you want to put in something in the two brackets, you need to make sure it's a string, okay? So make sure it's a string, and not just you make sure you wrap it around with quotation marks, right? Yeah. Guys, so make sure you wrap the text within the quotation marks, right? So I see confessor, right? Right now, right, you remember try and store your input into a variable. So what you can do is in front of the input you put it as num equals to input something, right? Yeah, correct. So and then when the colons. Yep. So you want to put in the integer, right? Okay, let's go. Anyone needs any help? Right, just type it in chat. Right, so let me just help out with the code, okay? Right, so now you want to put int and then you bracket, right? And you have another bracket. And then the colon, you want to put inside the string, right? The colon you want to put inside the string, right? So hold on, complete error, right? So remember, you want to take in two integers, right? So now you have one integer, right? Confessor. Right. So now you want to have another number, right? You want to have another integer. So you want to repeat the same step. Yep. So it only works for one integer. So you need to take in two, right? So you have two separate num equals to something. Right. So prasamsa, right? Right. So what you might want to try is instead of having the split function, you have two separate num1 equals to num2 equals to, and you have two separate inputs, right? So let me help out with you for you. So num1 equals to input something, and num2 equals to input something, right? So this is yeah. So right, correct. I see KBD cat, right, doing the correct thing, right? Good job. Yep, I see Jake Lee's also, successfully building his code. All right. Some of you guys have not started. Okay, so 22S3C Rama Mall, right? So the problem now is you haven't initialized a variable. So you want to try put num1 equals, right? Then remember, when we want to take it integer, right? We must make sure we put int in front, correct? Int, int, right? So now it's a working code. But you only have a first number. So what can you want to find the second number, right? So yeah, replicate the same code for the second number, right? So any questions? Yep. Okay. So it has been more than 3 minutes, right? Now I'll be going through the answer for task 1. Okay. Right. Task 1 answer. Right. Very straightforward. Right. We have the first number. We want to know what's the first number. So we take in an integer input. Right. Int input first num. Right. You take in an input and then you have integer, right? In front to make it into an integer, right? You have the first number. You want to find the second number. You repeat it, okay? Num2 equals to input second number, right? And you change it into an integer. And once you're done getting all the inputs that you need, then you print out the num1 plus num2, right? So take some time to digest the code, okay? Try and understand the code, what it does, right? It might be a bit confusing, the syntax, but don't worry, right? Just try and break this down line by line and understand it. Right. So okay, I see more. Right. Okay. So take some time to copy down the code. Okay. Copy into your Repl.it account, and then yeah, this is how you add two integers together. Right. So I hope everyone has finished copying the code. Right, I see someone still copying the code, right? So right, I see, right, Paul Fire, right? If you want, you can take in the code for this answer for this question. Right, I see most of you guys should be done with copying. Okay. Right. Arrow. Right. Arrow. All right. So I see that. Yeah. Okay. You got the code. Right. Okay. Never mind. Right. So okay. I hope everyone has finished copying down the code. Okay. And do feel free to change all these whatever that's inside. Right. We try this out. Right. So if you guys haven't tried to run it yet, right, I'll show you how it runs. Right. So we take in first number. in second number, right? And now we want to print the sum of it, right? So Python will ask first number, what is it? Right? You can change whatever is inside here, okay? Don't worry about like what I put, right? You can, whatever you want to put, whatever is easier for you, right? You can just, type it in. But make sure that your colons are all inside of this quotation mark, okay? I saw some common mistakes just now, which are you guys either forgot the quotation marks or you guys did not put the colon inside the quotation marks, right? Quotation marks are these little things, right? The two little things, right? So these are quotation marks, right? Remember, if you want to put inside a string inside an input, if you want to put something in here, make sure to wrap it with quotation marks, right? So now, the math question, let's try. What's 100 plus 34? And now here's the answer, right? Python just gives you the answer. It does the math for you, right? 134, right? We try with another number. We try 45 and 34, right? You print out 79. So this is how the code works, right? Takes in the first number, takes in the second number, and then it prints out the sum, right? This is the sum. Oh, and what if, you want to store the sum as a variable? And we talk about variables, right? You want to store this information, right? How do we go around doing that? Like, let's say you still need the sum. Well, we can, initialize a variable, right? Sum of numbers. And it goes to num1 plus num2. We store the answer into sum of numbers variable, right? This is another way if you want to do it, right? And then you print out sum of numbers, right? So you can store it in a variable, then you print the variable, or you can just print out the num plus, num1 plus num2, right? And next time, if you want a reference to sum of numbers, you can use it. You don't have to type num1 plus num2, or like every time you want to find a sum, right? So let's move on, okay? Right. So now, Celine will be teaching you guys about data structures in Python, right? It will be lists and tuples, right? So Celine, please, can take over now, right? So Celine will be sharing screen, and I will be, answering any questions that you guys have in the chat box. Okay, so feel free to, type it in the chat, right? And then I'll reply to your questions. Okay, right, Celine.
Screen. But can you type in the chat? Can you guys see my screen? Okay. Wait, technical difficulty. Let me try to share my screen again.
Celine will be re-entering the call because technical difficulties, but just take this time to experiment out with some of the functions that I taught you just now, right? Play around with it and try and make working code, right? All right. Meanwhile, as we wait for Celine to settle her problem, why not you guys try and create a code instead of adding the numbers together? You try and multiply them together, right? Take in two integers and you multiply them together instead of just adding them, right? Let's try that, right? Try experiment with the uh, code itself, different functions, and you see how you can play around with how you use it. Uh, Also, when you use Repl.it, right? Make sure the code that you are doing, try and do it in the same file as whatever that I did just now, right? Because if not, the Repl.it will only execute one of the files, and you guys will run into a problem. Yeah. So uh, a simple way to you can to ignore whatever code that you have previously. You guys can just put a hashtag in front of each line. Yeah, it's called commenting in Python, right? So let's say grammar more, I will just put in a hashtag, and then if you try and run it, it will ignore the code, right? Right. So I think Celine has fixed her issue. Okay.
Hi guys, can you guys see my screen now?
Well, I see some of you guys, work, uh, experimenting out with, different ways of uh, writing the code. That's really good. Right, I see that it's working. Most of you guys one is working. Right, good job. Keep it up. And just bear a while and wait for Celine to be, fix her issue here. Right.
Test. Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Can?
Try sharing your screen.
Okay, wait.
You're able to screen share instead, and then Celine can just present the workshop according to your screen share.
Can you all see the screen? Can, right? Can see, yeah? Right, so I will just share the screen instead. Okay, can we move on now? Okay. Alright, so okay. So you can continue.
Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Wait, sorry.
Sure, yeah, we'll be posting the recordings of this session on YouTube, so you can easily refer back to this workshop.
She's currently experiencing a lot of lag now, so please be patient. And once she settles her issue, we can proceed with the program.
Okay. You guys can hear me, right? Can you all hear me? Can you guys type in the chat one last time?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so I'll now be going on list. So like list is basically like a container in Python. So while in like variable, right, you guys can only store one item. You can use a list to store multiple items inside. So it's like a container. So the syntax for a list is fairly simple. You use the square bracket operator. So on the screen, you guys can see the languages list store 3 elements of the data type strings, Python, C++, and JavaScript. Then the fruits list store 1 element of the data type string, apple. And last, the list my list store 3 elements of the data type integer, the number 100, 2, and 3. Next. So yeah, one characteristic of list is that you can store elements of different data types inside the list. So like one list, right, inside them, the elements don't have to be of the same data type. So you can store like boolean, string, integer, all in one list. For example, like on the screen there, right, the list details store 2 elements of the data type string and 1 element of the data type integer. This means that a list can also store another list as its elements. For example, in the screen, the list containing the boolean true and more is nested inside a larger list called myList. Yeah, so storing a list inside another list is called nesting a list. Yeah. So, sorry, I cannot see the screen share, sorry, wait. Okay, so now that we know like what a list do, right? Like store multiple items in Python, we need to know like know how to access the items inside the list. And this is where list indexing comes in. To put it simply, list indexing is basically a way to identify the elements inside the list. It's like how in school, right, in your classroom, every student have their own index number. Every student have their own index number. In Python, it also works the same way, but the only difference is that in Python, data structures are zero index. So instead of counting from 1, 2, and then 3, you count from 0. You count from 0 instead. So like so like here on the screen, you guys can see the colors list have a few elements, and instead of counting from 0, you count from 1. So can you guys try to guess what this code over here will print out? Yeah, so if you run the code, right, it will print out. Yeah, if you run the code, right, it will print out red because red is the one index elements inside the list. Yeah, so Ryan, can you try to like print out colors 2 instead and then run the code? So if you do colors 2, it will print out the one index element, which is the second index element, which is yellow. Yeah, okay, can we go back to the slides? Next. Yeah, so now we know that we can use the square bracket operator to like access elements inside the list. Similarly, we can also use the square bracket operator to modify elements inside the list. Yeah, Ryan, can you go back to Repl.it? Yeah. So if you do colors 1 and you try to like modify the elements inside and you print the list, you can see that the new list is printed out, but now the element inside is modified. Yeah, y'all can try to do it in your own Repl.it. Just try typing out the code, make your own list, and add your own elements inside. And try to like print them out and modify them. Yeah. Continuing on list, right? There's also this thing. Wait, can you go back to the last slide? There's also this thing called negative indexing in Python. How it works is like similar to normal indexing, but instead you index from the back. So -1 refers to the last element, -2 refers to the second last element, and so on. So if you do print colors -1, it will output pink because pink is the -1 index element inside the list. Next. Yeah. So now that we know what is list indexing, now we are going to touch on list slicing. List slicing, the idea is like very similar to list indexing, but like while list indexing allow you to only access one element inside the list at a time, the list slicing allow you to access like a chunk of the element at one time. So yeah, you guys can see on the screen there's like a list that containing letters that spell out programming, right? And there's 2 print statement underneath the list. Can you guys try to guess what each of the print statement will do? Yeah, you guys can try type in the chat or something. And Ryan can show y'all what it will actually do when it's run in Repl.it. Yeah, so when you do print my list 2 semicolon 5, the program will output like the elements at index 2, 3, and 4. Take note that 5 is not printed out. That's just like the syntax in Python. So if you do 2 semicolon 7, the program will output the elements at index 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but not 7. Yeah, you guys can try like playing around with the syntax in your own Repl.it now. So if you do like print my list 5 semicolon, right, then you never add the last number and you run the code, Python will assume that you are telling it to print from the index 5 all the way to the end. So it will output the elements at index 5, 6, 7 all the way to the end. Yeah. Oh yeah, do you guys know that string indexing and slicing, slicing and indexing also works on strings. So like not only on lists, you can also do the same thing with the same syntax on a list. Yeah. Next. So yeah, you guys can try doing it on a string right now on your Repl.it. Okay, next. Now we are going to learn functions, like functions and methods that work on a string. The first function that we are going to learn is the len function. Like true to its name, the function, what it does is it returns the length, that is the number of elements inside the list. So can you guys try to guess what these few lines of code will output? Just type in the chat or something. Yeah. Yeah, I see 5. Rain, can you go Repl.it and try to run the code? Yeah, so if we try to delete like a few elements inside the list and we print it again. Yeah, you guys can see that now it outputs 4. Okay. Next slide. The next method we are going to learn is the append, the dot append, and the dot pop method. The dot append method basically allows you to add elements to the back of the list, while the dot pop method allows you to pop elements from the list. So you guys can see the example. We have a list, an empty list called subjects. At first it's empty, then you do the subjects.append physics and subjects.append literature. So what these 2 lines of code is doing is it's adding physics to the back of the list and then add literature to the back of the list. And when you do subjects.pop 0, it's what the line of code is basically doing is trying to pop, like remove the element at index 0 inside the list. So take note, what you type out inside the round bracket for the dot pop is not the name of the element, but instead the index of the element. Yeah. Arian, can you try to show them the code in Repl.it? Yeah, y'all can try trying this like dot append and dot pop method in your own Repl.it first. Take like a few minutes to do it. Like just experiment around with the method. yeah, just try to use dot append and dot pop, and maybe you can use the length function also. Try on your own Repl.it now. Okay, now we are going to learn about dot sort and dot reverse. What dot sort does is basically sort the list in ascending order. So on the screen we have like a list scores of numbers in no particular order. Then when you do a dot sort, right, and you print out the list, you can see that the list will now be printed out in ascending order. Yeah, so if you run the code, yeah, so you guys can see 13, 17, and so on. The list is now sorted in ascending order. So now how do we sort a list in descending order? We use a dot reverse. So like just do dot sort and then dot reverse. Take note though, you guys have to do the dot sort first and then reverse the list and not the other way around. And if you do it correctly, then the list will now be printed out in descending order instead. Yeah, so now the list is printed out in descending order. Next. Now that we are done with lists, let's move on to the next data structure, tuples. Tuples is basically very similar to lists, but it has very limited functionality. There's two main differences between a list and a tuple. First, a list is denoted by square bracket, while a tuple is denoted by round brackets. And the next difference, and probably the most important difference that all of you have to take note of, is that a list is mutable, while a tuple is not mutable. What does this mean? Let's take a look at the next example so I can like illustrate what this means to you guys. Yeah, so if you run the code, yeah, as expected, fun is printed out because fun is the second index element inside the list. Now, if we try to modify the tuple, and run the code, you can see that an error statement is written. This is because a tuple is not mutable. It means that you cannot modify any elements inside the tuple. So the method .append.pop doesn't you cannot do that on a tuple because you cannot add any elements into a tuple. You cannot remove any elements from a tuple, and you cannot modify any elements inside the tuple. Yeah, so this is what it means when I say that a tuple is not mutable. Yeah, y'all can try to spend the next few minutes working, like experimenting on tuples. Yeah, you guys can try to do a dot append and a dot pop on a tuple and see what it does in your own Repl.it account. Next, this is the two methods that you can use for a tuple, that you can use to apply in a tuple. It's like dot count and dot index. The dot count method basically counts the number of occurrences of that element inside the tuple, while the dot index method returns the first occurrence of that element in the tuple. So if you do a dot count 5, it will return a 0 because as you guys can see, there's no element 5 inside the tuple. Yeah, and if you do a tup.index 4, it will return like a 2 because the 4 appears first at the index 2. Yeah. So if you try to modify the code and do a tup.count4, yeah, now it will return a 3 because there's 3 occurrences of the element 4 inside the tuple. Okay, now we are going to take like a 5-minute break before Rayan is going to continue on loops and conditional statements. So yeah, just take a 5-minute break.
So I'll have the code over here. If you guys need any, if you guys need any to go back to any page, feel free to type in a message and I'll go back to the page, right? But now we have 5 minutes break until we'll go 4:33, okay? 4:33, we come back and then we'll continue on with the program, right? So take a short break, try things out. Okay, if you guys need any help, you guys can type in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Someone asked me what is the code for adding of numbers. Okay, so I will go back to the code. Right, so you're gonna find a sum, and here is the code. Right. You are welcome. Okay, just to share with you guys, right? Index, right, does not only work for tuples, right? You can also use it on, lists. Okay, so instead of just normal tuple, you can try on this and see what it does, right? It's not limited to only tuples. Okay. Okay, so it has been 5 minutes, right? So let's move on with the program, okay? So hold on. Right, can you all see my screen? Can see? Yeah. Type it in the chat. Okay, I see some yes. Okay, come. Let's start on loops. Right. So loops, if, while, and range. These are the content that I'm going to be teaching for this segment, right? It will be a bit confusing, but don't worry, we will go through one by one, right? So, it's important to learn all these loops because it helps you control your program, okay? And it opens up to a lot of different functions your program can do, can perform, and based on what you want, right? Right. Let's see this scenario. Your math teacher finally marked your math script, right? Just now we were doing your math script in the exam, and you want to make your life easier, right? You don't want to keep on checking, what is the cutoff point for each different grade. So you think about, okay, I want to make a code that tells me, right, what is my grade just by me inputting my score, right? So now you might be thinking, how do you check in Python? Right? You have all these, data. How do you check if the data that you have is, it will help you or not, right? Or whether it satisfies condition, right? How does checking work in Python? Okay, so I will be introducing this very key concept, very powerful function statement, the if statements. right? So, what exactly is an if statement, right? From now, let's refer to if statements as, it starts with an if, right? It starts with an if, and then you have whatever code down here, and it has three spaces, right? What these three spaces means is it is indentation, right? Indentation is important in Python because the Python is very stingy with is how it looks, right? So you want to categorize whatever code that you want to put in the if statement, indented with spaces below the if statement. Okay, and if you don't want it to be in the if statement, you just don't put indentation in front, right? If you can see here, if then Boolean expression, then what you do when it is true, right? Remember, we went through what is Boolean expressions earlier on. Okay, those who still unclear on what is Boolean expression, you can type it in chat, right? So when we come to if statements, right, we think about it like English, right? If it is true, we do something. If it is false, we just ignore, correct? So if it's raining, we stay at home, right? If not, we just go out, right? So if it rains, stay at home, right? Something like this to try and visualize the if statements, right? We take a look at this if code snippet. We set x to be 15, and we ask Python if x is less than 0. Well, 15 is definitely not less than 0, right? So we ignore all this, right? Because this is not true. The statement is not true, right? So we let's try and run this code on Repl.it, right? So if statement, right? So if x is less than 0, we print this out, okay? Right, let's run this. This is the end of the program, okay? You might be wondering, we have all this code over here, but why doesn't it execute, right? The reason is because the Boolean expression is false, right? X is not less than 0, right? That's why you ignore all this and you just go to the print statement, right? What if you change this around and you ask if x is more than 0? And now, x is now 0 will be printed out, right? So if you can see here, right, whenever the Boolean expression is true, then you run the code under it, okay? If it is false, you just ignore and you continue with the program, right? Right, so let's continue. Right, so we take a look at this logic flow, okay? We start with stage 1. Is it true or not, right? If it's true, we run the statement. If it's false, we just continue, okay? Right, we just ignore and we continue, right? This is false, we ignore, we continue, okay? Right, so if statements, pretty intuitive, right? It's just like simple English. We try and make sense of it using our English language, right? But now let's introduce else. Sometimes you don't want your program to just ignore the code that you wrote, correct? Well, if and else works opposite ways, right? So if you can see here, right, if the expression is true, you run the code under the if. So what if it's not, right? Else, you run the code under the else statement, right? So this is the syntax of if and else, right? You have an if, the expression, and then you have a colon over here, all right? 3 spaces and then the code. Similarly for else, colon, 3 spaces and then the code, right? We take a look at this example, right? Now, I want you guys to take some time and think about what is this code, what exactly is this code doing, right? You see if, you see else, and you see 3 print statements. Try and think about what this code does, right? Okay, So remember when we say that if the first boolean is wrong, is false, you go to the else statement, right? So you try and run this program, okay? And I'll explain the nature of how else statements are, right? So we set x to be 15, right? If it's less than 0, we set it to 0 and then we print this, right? If not, we will print nothing has changed, right? And then we continue the program, correct? So now let's see what it happens. Right, so it says nothing is changed and this is the end of the program. So why? This is because the Boolean expression over here is x less than 0 is false, right? So when you have an else statement, it is assuming that all the statements above, right? If the else, all the statements above are already false. Then you go to the else, right? So what if we change this around and we ask if x is more than 0? Right? We try. So now we have, x is now 0 printed out, and this is the end of the program, right? This will always be executed out, right? Why? Because it's not indented over here, right? There's no spacing in front. Hence, it's the normal code, right? So why does this only print out x is now 0? Because x is indeed more than 0, then we will go through this if statement, okay? So because this is true, you will only execute all of this, right? And you see the interesting about if and else statements, right, is that if one of them, if the if is true, else is already ignored, right? You ignore all this, right? So this is why I say if and else are like opposites of one another, because if the if statement don't work, the else statement will work. If the if statement works, the else statement doesn't work, right? Okay, so those with any questions, right? I know it's a bit confusing because you have all these if and else, but an easier way is to change it into English, right? Right. So let me give an example, right? If it's raining, stay at home, right? Stay at home. Else, go outside, right? So this is like a Boolean expression, right? It returns true or false, right? Is it raining or is it sunny, right? If it's raining, it'll be true. If it's not, it'll be false, right? This stay at home is like your code, what you do if the expression is true. Go outside is the opposite, right? We assume that now it's not raining, right? Now it's not raining, and then we can go outside, right? So try and break this down into English, and it's easier to visualize it if you change it, convert it into an English simpler manner, right? In English, right? So let's move on. Now you have a basic understanding of what if and else do. Right? We introduce this very powerful statement called else if. Okay? But then you think, where is else if? Right? There is no else if over here. In Python, the short form for else if is elif, right? E-L-I-F, I-F, right? So you take the first two letters and then if, okay? Right. We remember the nature of what else is, right? So else basically, only executes if the above statements are false, correct? So when we merge else if, which is elif, okay, I will be saying else if a lot, but just note that it means elif, okay? Yeah, so it's easier if I say else if than elif, because else the nature of else will be heavily tested here, right? So right, we look at this code. If Boolean expression, if it's true, we do this. And remember how if statements are, right? If this is true, right, we ignore whatever is below, correct? We tested out in some examples just now, right? Now, what if it's not true? And then we go below, we see elif bool expression 2. Well, we think about this, we try and like break it down, right? We think about else if as other questions that you ask the computer, right? So if the above is false, you go on to the next question. If the above is false, you go on to the next question, right? And then if one of them is true, you stop running everything. Like the if statement, everything else you below, you ignore. Then if all else above, like all elif above is false, you run the else statement, right? I went through the else statement earlier. So else will always run if everything above is false. Right? We focus on else if now. So don't worry if it's a bit confusing now. We can take a look at a logic flow chart. Okay. Now, stage 1. Is the Boolean expression true? Right? Is the first expression true? If it is true, you run the code below it, right? If it's true, do this, correct? We went through this at the start. But what if it is false, right? This is the question we're asking ourselves. What if it's false? Now, if it is false, we go back to stage 1 for the subsequent else if statements, right? We keep asking questions, right? Same thing. We go to the next question. So, elif expression 2, right? If it is true, we run this, right? What if it's false? Then we go back to stage 1 and we do the same thing for the subsequent elif statements, right?
Because
sorry, there's someone unmuted.
Slow.
Can you please mute yourself?
Like, see?
Right. So basically, else if you can try and think about it as asking the program multiple questions if the above questions are false, right? So yeah, I'll show you an example now, right? So, right, now let's think about a real world context, right? Let's say we are making a web page login and we only let this person name called Bob and John to enter the website, right? So we want to make website login for username that only accepts John and Bob as a name, right? So only if your name is John and Bob, then you can access the website, right? So we start with an input. We ask, okay, what is your name? Right, the website asks, what is your name? Right, code this out with me, okay? What is your name? Right? We went through this. Input is asking for an input from the user, right? So you will be typing in your name, right? We got this part, right? So we have the name stored, right? That's cool. So now it begins for the checking process, right? So we only accept John and Bob. But how do we do that, right? We can try and use an if statement. If name is equals to John. Right? Code this out with me, right? As the more you code, the easier it gets to remember, okay? Right, so now the Boolean expression over here is asking if name equals to John. Right. So we're asking Python, is the name equals to John? If it is, print welcome back, John. Right. But we don't want to leave Bob behind, right? We only care about so far we only validate for John. So what we can do is we try using an else if statement. Right? else if name equals to Bob, we print welcome back Bob. Right, we want to welcome them both. But if both of the names are not, Bob or John, just type, hey, get out. We don't want you to be John. We don't want you to come into my, website, right? Get out. Right. So let's try and run this, okay? Oh, my name is John, okay? It says welcome back, John. Right, we test it with Bob, right? Oh, so the program welcomes me back, right? So if you can see here, if and else if, right, are like asking the program a question, right? If the name is John, you print this. Else, if the name is Bob, you print this, right? But if both of them are false, right, we test it out. If my name, I put it as Rayan, it's not Bob or John, you'll just print get out, right? It shoots me out. Okay? So here is the basic understanding of if and else if, right? Can. So take some time to look at this logic flow and try and understand how it is like in a else if statements. Right? Give you guys about 1 minute. Right, any questions, feel free to just type in chat and Salim will assist you, okay? Okay. Right, so now you have a basic understanding of if and else, right? Very important and powerful statements. Let's try this out. Let's look at this, right? Let's try this out, right? We have two ifs and we have an else if and if. Can you tell what is the difference between the two of them? Right, these two are the outputs. This is the input. I mean output, right? Well, the thing about Python is, if you have two separate ifs, they are regarded as two different if statements. But if you have if and else if, it is regarded as one whole chunk of if statement, right? So these two are connected. These two are not connected. These two are not related to one another, right? So yeah, this is the difference between if and else if, right? Make sure whenever you use the if statements, okay, be clear of what you want your program to do, right? If you want it to build on to your previous if statements, use else if. If not, it's a different set of question. You use another if. All right. So now, okay, we started on with the situation, correct? So now we try. All right. Let's put whatever you learn to the test. Right. This is a bit challenging. Okay, but we try this out. Right. Using if, else if, and else statements. Try and create a program that outputs your grade, whenever you input the score, right? And these are all the constraints, right? To get A, you have to get 75 or equals to 75 or above, right? B, so on and so forth, right? Take these 5 minutes, try and create a working program using if, elif, and else, and try and output the grade that you get, right? You want to either output A, B, C, D, or E, okay? So try this out, right? 5 minutes. Right, so hold on, give me a minute. I'll screen share the question. Right, okay. So can you guys see the question? I think you guys will be able to see the question now. Right, so try this question out, right? Take this 5 minutes and try the question on your own Repl.it account, okay? You guys have until 5, right? give this question a try. Okay, guys. Don't forget the is ELIF, okay, not else if, right? ELIF, right? Is here. This is stated over here. So I'll highlight it over here, right? You guys want to use ELIF, okay? I see someone typing else if, right? So yeah, change and it's case sensitive, huh? So make sure the E at the start is not capital, okay? Yep, correct. Right. So okay, you guys have 1 more minute. It's okay if you guys cannot do it. I'll go through the answer, right? Okay. Okay, I'll continue with it now, right? So hold on. Okay, can I check if everyone can see the screen? Can, huh? Yes, yeah, and don't worry, I'll get rid of it, right? So again, we carry on with the program now, right? So, right, this is the intended solution for it, okay? You first get the integer input of the score. If the score is more than or equals to 75, you print A, right? Else if the score is more than or equals to 65, you print B, right? So remember, right, is when you go down to the second if question, right, you're already assuming that the number is not going to be more than or equals to 75, okay? Because this will only execute when the above statement is false, remember, right? So, so for each constraint I gave, right, over here, you put in a separate else if statement for it, right? And then you print the grade that you'll be getting, right? Okay, I'll give you guys about 1 minute to try and copy down real quick. Right, if you guys cannot copy down fast enough, we have YouTube. We are gonna record this and post it on YouTube. So it's okay if you guys can't copy it right now, because we need to move on to the next section soon, right? Okay, so right, so one Alright, so let's move on to the next section, right? So your math teacher gives you guys some homework to do, right? She wants to know if you guys know your numbers from 1 to 10 inclusive, but not just any numbers, right? The square of the numbers. But you're too lazy to calculate them one by one. So you decide, why not make a code for it? But isn't it too troublesome to code print 1 power of 2, 2 power of 2, line by line? And what if the range is much larger, right? Now I'll introduce to you guys for loops. Right? For loops are very important, concepts to grasp using Python, right? So you'll be using a lot of for loops, while loops in Python, if statements, and these are some examples of what you can do with for. Right? You have a string here, Python. For each individual character, you want to print the character, right? For each character inside of the string, you want to print the character. Now, we have a list, red, blue, yellow, and green, right? Now, you want to print each color in the list, right? What you can do is, you go for each element in the colors list, you print the element, right? So we try this out now, Repl.it, right? Very quickly, let's try the first one out, right? So string equals to Python, and for each character in the string, you want to print the character, okay? Right, let's run this. Okay, you see, each individual letter is being, printed out. So this is what I mean by you can iterate through each element in the list or string, right? So you can try this out with the list yourself. You will print out red, blue, yellow, and green, right? Okay, now, what's interesting about for loops is that you can also use with another function called range, right? For I in range something something, right? And then you do this. Right, let's look at what is range, right? So let's look at some example using the range function, right? And I'll show you like what how range works using these snippets, right? So for I in range 6, what this means is from numbers 0 to 5. Why 0 to 5, you may ask? Well, whatever you put in here, right, it is non-inclusive. What does it mean? That means you don't count it, okay? So I will take on the number 0 to 5 and you'll print out the numbers, right? So we try this, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So you can see the characteristic of your range, right? It goes from whatever number is from 0 to whatever number that you put, non-inclusive, right? What if you change it to, for I in range 3? Now you go to 0, 1, 2, right? Okay, so what if we try this code over here, 0, 6, 2? We put in 3 arguments. The first argument will always mean what you start with if you have 3 arguments or 2 arguments, right? The first argument is, which is what you input right in here, the brackets is what you start with, right? And then when we do this, it's same as when we ran the previous code, right? It always starts from 0. Now, what if we start from 1? Right, we start index 1. Now, it will show 1, 2, because it starts from index 1 and it stops at index 2, right? You don't go to index 3, okay? Now, let's introduce step, right? If you want to skip through, different numbers, what can you do, right? You want to skip every 2 numbers, right? So we try this. Now we say 0, 2, and 4. What this means is that it's going to, at first it starts with 0, right? You plus 2, then you have index 2. I is now 2, right? You plus another 2. Now I is 4. You plus another 2. I is now 6. But you remember, you don't include the number that you put as the stop, right? So you ignore the 6 and you just output 2, 4, and 0. Right. Those with any questions, feel free to ask in the chat, and Celine will assist you. Okay. Right. So remember, the stop function, the stop argument, the stop input is required. Right. So you take it when you have only one thing inside it. This is the stop argument. Right. If you have 3, it will be start, stop, and step respectively. Right. Okay, but usually you won't really be using all 3 arguments unless you really have to, right? Okay, now we move on to the while loop, right? While loop is a very interesting loop because you'll keep executing whenever the condition in here is true, right? This condition can be any Boolean expression, okay? And as it is true, you do whatever is in the loop, right? You do the code whatever is in the loop, right? But note, you have to have something that stops the condition one point or another. If not, you run forever, right? Okay, we look at this, right? I think it will be better for you guys to visualize it, right? With some real code. So we look at this, I equals to 0, right? This is our counter. This X is our counter. While I is less than 3, we print hello, right? Then every time we go through that loop, we add 1 to I, right? So we try and run this. Now it runs and it has 3 hellos, right? So you can tell, right, that we just print out what's I, okay? We print I, right? So I initially started with 0. Then you print hello, right? It's still less than 3. You add 1 to it and you come back into the loop. Now, you ask, what is I? Now, I is now 1. You print hello, and you add another 1 to I, right? You add another 1. This is called incrementing, right? And then you go back to the while loop, right? You look at the condition, right? The condition is true, right? Is 2 is still less than 3. Now you print what is I. Now it's 2, right? And then you continue to go on print hello, right? That's why you have 3 hellos over here. And now that I is equals to 3, you stop going through the loop, right? Okay, so this is how while loops basically, are like, right? Make sure you always have a counter to, break out of the while loop, right? Okay. Now using what you understand from the loops and while loop, right? We try and print out the squares of numbers from 1 to 10 inclusive. So this is for your homework, okay? So you're using while loop, right? Print the squares of numbers from 1 to 10, okay? And if anyone has any questions, just feel free to ask it in the chat. Hold on, I will share the question. Right, so here is right, so this is the question, right? Feel free to ask in chat if you have any question, right? The room chat, okay? Try this task out on Repl.it using a while loop, right? And we see if you can output the square 515, and then I have to rush through. Okay, I don't see any questions, so you guys should don't forget, you need to make sure you have a counter to break out of the loop, right? Just like what I did with I over there, right? I equals to 0, and then I go through the while loop, right? Okay. So I'm assuming you guys have gave some thought to it and tried the question out, right? Okay. So it's going to be 5:15. All right. I'll share the answer to the question soon. Right. Don't worry if you're stuck on any any. Okay. I see Jake List. Right. His code is he got. I'm pretty sure he got the right code. Yep. He got the right code. Good job. Okay. I see. I see. Confessor is still trying to, figure out the code. Okay, I see. Prasamsa, right? Uh, you're getting the code correct as well, right? So good job, good job, good job, right? Okay, and it is 5:15. Let's briefly go through the answers, right? And if you don't understand the answer, you can take a look at it after the session. You'll be on YouTube, right? So I have to go quicker now. Right. So very simple, very straightforward. Okay. You start initializing num to be 1, and then while it is less than or equals to 10, you just print, what is num to the power of 2. Okay. So make sure you wrap it with a bracket, because it's a function, right? Remember, it's a function, right? Okay. So right, I have to move on now. Right, is if you guys can't copy it in time, there's a YouTube video uploaded. Right, so I'll move on now. Okay. Now, Celine will be talking about functions and recursions, on Python, and confessor, right? Your while, right? Make sure is lowercase while, right? Case sensitive, yes. Yeah. Right. So I'll pass the time to Celine, and she'll go through the functions and recursion. Okay, Celine, please.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you? Right? Okay. So before I goes on to talk about function and recursion, right? Try to imagine this scenario. Your math teacher is now teaching the class the new topic on volume of objects. Your teacher places a cuboid down and asks what is the volume of the cuboid given its length, breadth, and height. So I think for us, we can agree that it's fairly easy to code the volume of the cuboid given its length. You can just do like a print statement and then just do length times breadth times height, right? But imagine I give you a set of 1 million different length, breadth, and height, and I want you to give me the volume of all the different cuboid. Then it becomes very tedious to code them because you have to code the same line over and over again a million times. And this is where function comes in. Think of function as a tool. It's a block of reusable code that you can use to speed up your coding process and reduce repetitions in your code. So the syntax of function is fairly simple. You just do def, define. Def stands for define. Def space, the name of the function, followed by the arguments of the function inside the round bracket, and then semicolon. So what are arguments? Arguments in the context of a function is basically information you pass on to the function so that the function can use this information and process them to return something to you. Yeah. Next. So let's try to take a look at this very simple function. This function called add10 is basically a function to add the number 10 to a value, to whatever value that the user will later input. Yeah. Next. Alternatively, right, you can also code a function that take in no arguments. So inside the run bracket, it will be empty. And then when the function runs later on, it will ask the user to input the value of x and y and then return the sum of the two values. Okay, Ryan, can you go to Repl.it and try to run this function? Yeah, so the output is 120 because 120 is the sum of 123. Yep, go back to the slides. Next. Okay, so due to a lack of time, we're going to skip through this part. Okay, now we are going to touch on recursion. Recursion is basically like a type of function. It's a function that calls upon itself. I'm going to like illustrate more what I mean by a function that calls upon itself later. But for now, you guys just need to remember like all recursive functions obey two rules. First, there must be a base case where the function ends. And second, they must change the state of the function each time it's called. So what is state? State is basically like arguments. Like, so every time the function calls itself, the state have to be a new state. Like the state have to change. The argument that you pass on to the new function have to change. Next. Okay, so this is a simple flowchart of how a recursive function works. First, you initiate the function, and then you see is like the base case, is it true? If it's true, then you just return the statement according to the context and the function ends. But if it's not true, then the function will call upon itself again, but now with a different state, a different argument. Yeah. Next. Yeah, so to illustrate what I mean, let's try to take a look at this example. It's called Happy New Year. So this function is basically a function that will count down and then print Happy New Year. So yeah, what the argument you pass on is just how many seconds you want it to count down. Yeah, so if you run the function, yeah, it'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. Then if you do like a 6 instead of 5 or something, then it'll do 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then Happy New Year. So now I'm going to like go through like step by step how it works. Yeah. So firstly, when the function is initialized, for example, with a value of 5, then the base case is this, like is n equals to 0. It's not, right? So it's false. So we print n, which is 5, and the function is called again. Now with the value, like, but you decrease the value of n by 1. So now the function is called again with the value 4, and we check again, is 4 equals to 0? It's not, right? So we print 4 and call the function again, now with the value 3. And this just goes on until finally when n is 0, the base case is true. So we return Happy New Year and we don't call the function anymore. So like the function ends. Yeah. Next is the second example we are going to take a look at is this recursive function that prints out the factorial of a number. So yeah, so the factorial of 5 is just 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, right? So how are we going to code this recursively? You guys can now take like the next few minutes to try to read this code and like try to think of how it works before I discuss. Yeah, try to take a few minutes to digest the code in front. Okay, then if we run this code on Repl.it, yeah, 120 is printed out because 120 is the factorial of 5. Okay, go back to the slide. Oh, yeah, factorial of 3 is 6. Because 1 times 2 times 3 is 6. So yeah, how this like factorial function works is, firstly, for example, like the factorial of 4. So f, we pass 4 as the argument firstly. So is 4 equals to 1? No, right? So return false. So it's a false. So now the f4 will return 4 times f3. So the function is called again, but now with a value of 3. So is 3 equals to 1? No. So the function f3 will return 3 times f2. So the function is called again, but now with a value of 2. So f2 is 2 equals to 1? No. So return 2 times f1. And the function is now called again with the value of 1. And 1 is finally equals to 1. And so the statement ends with like the function will end by returning 1. And so you can see that the final function, right? This f4 over here will return 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is 24. Yeah, the factorial of 4. Yeah. So f3 will call 3 times f2. And finally, when the base case is called, which is like f1, yeah. So f4 is equals to 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Yeah. 24. Right. Okay, so I'm going to pass on the time to Yi Ting now.
Right, so that's the end of our program. Now Ting will debrief all of you. Right, thank you so much for joining. And those with any questions can continue to type in the chat. Right, those who missed out on anything, the video will be uploaded on YouTube. Okay, so don't worry. Yeah, I can share the slides. Just hold on. Wait, give me a while. Building Blocks YouTube channel. I think Ik Ting will brief you guys on it. Right?
Hello, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the workshop and we hope you managed to learn something. I will now throw a whole bunch of links into the chat. So please wait a second. So the YouTube link is over there. if you'd like to, we are uploading this recording on YouTube. So if you'd like to recap on anything, you may do so. I'm actually Yik Ting, so I'm one of the OICs of Building Blocks, and I want to do a short intro of Building Blocks. So Building Blocks is this by student for student event, and usually we do it nationally, but this year we are doing international outreach, and we're having a few more conferences soon. So if you're interested, please follow our Instagram on BuildingBloCS22 and stay active on our Discord community. So we'll be having more workshops from now on. And this stage, I want to thank the Building Blocks organizing team. So thank you, Rayan and Celine. And if any of you are interested to join us as an organizer, please sign up with the link in the chat. You don't have to be a computing student, and we have a lot of areas that you can help out. There's a lot to learn in being an organizer, and you get to reach out to international students as well. So if interested, please sign up as an organizer. Once again, the link is in the chat. And with that, I hope everybody has managed to learn something today. Please complete the reflection form, which is in the chat, which I've also sent. So it's the very first link, the Google form, and please complete that so that we are able to improve on our workshops. And if you have any questions for the workshops organizers, we'll get them. You can ping them. I'll send a message out later on how to ping them, and you can ping them in the events general chat, and you can ask any questions that you like. They will also share the slides with you. With that, once you have completed the event form, you are free to go. Thank you very much for joining in today, and we hope you have learned something and have a good time. See you soon.
If you guys want to further build on your knowledge on Python, and you want to venture out to different languages, feel free to join the other workshops that we have in Building Blocks, right? So a good one will be intro to C++, databases, and as well as computational thinking, right? Which it dives deep into how the computer code works and what you should be thinking about when you're coding, right? So do keep a lookout for these workshops if you guys are interested. It's in the same form as the one that you guys signed up on.
Sure, unfortunately, our form signups for the March conference have closed. So if you're interested, you can wait for the Forsatia or the June conference that's coming up. Especially the June conference is going to be a 1 week long of competitions and events. So you can put in what you have learned, whatever skills you've learned for the workshop, you can put it into good use and build on those skills so that they're really reinforced during the June conference. So please stay tuned on our Instagram and Discord. For those attending the Intro to SQL Databases workshop tonight, please note that the workshop is on Zoom and we have sent the link to your emails. Thank you.